Thank you so much to Lindsay and the whole team for allowing me to close day one. I'm also super ecstatic that you guys stayed before the networking, so thank you all for staying. It's very fitting that I'm following the Capital panel. They just discussed a little bit about what they're looking for, the current investment trends in the space, and I get to close with highlighting and showcasing some of the wonderful innovations, particularly in the financial side. So a lot of us are aware that our industry is financially stifled in more ways than one. And I can speak to you about this through a very unique lens that some of you already know. Oop. Yeah, so I have a very unique background in that I, like many other speakers, I was very delighted to hear, came from a technical agricultural background. I used to grow wholesale flowers in northern Ohio, and somewhere along the way, I somehow ended up in San Francisco working at a law firm just around the time ag tech really exploded. So I was doing a lot of corporate and intellectual property related transactions for food and agricultural technology companies. And now I've combined all of that wonderful knowledge, and I get to match companies with investors in this space. So, global capital markets, just a quick second. We are a boutique investment bank. A lot of people don't understand what investment bankers do. They just assume we open commercial bank accounts and maybe we trade stock, and we don't do any of that. So we're 20 bankers. We're based in Irvine. I'm based in our San Francisco office. We're global, as our name implies, and we basically provide three services. So M&A, growth capital, and strategic advising services. And our typical client across all of our industry verticals, they usually range in revenue from 10 to 150 million. That's our ideal client, particularly in this niche sector. We're just now starting to see some growth capital transactions in that area. And I bring up that we're industry agnostic because, as some of the other panelists have already described today, there's a lot of cross-flow and collaboration between different technologies and different spaces and different verticals. So Arima from Finisterre likened it to us cannibalizing technology from other industries, and it's certainly I can attest to that happening. This is kind of a very basic slide. If you look to the bottom, just my very basic supply chain slide, but we really source our deal flow from on the farm all the way to wholesale and retail. This year we do have a consumer product and food and beverage practice that we have traditionally done more traditional deals, and now really starting to see a lot of the alternative protein, the cricket, snack companies, CPG. So certainly when I think about ag tech, I also think, I consider food tech to be part of that. So sorry, my slides are out of order. So when we think about this topic, there we go. So when we think about this topic, it's kind of been an underpin to what we've been discussing today is why is so much money, or why is not enough money being pumped into this space? And the USDA Economic Research Services came out, they used all of their wonderful agronomic data, and they have this report called the Farm Dollar Series. There's actually 3 different reports encased in that data, and you can download it from their website. But this is just one view of how they look at, for every dollar that we spend, that a consumer in the United States spends to buy food, in the value supply chain, this is where it went. And as you can see, a lot of it, unsurprisingly, is all downstream. And it's very interesting when we think about that from a consumer preference perspective and all of the other other evidence that we get that different parts of the supply chain are certainly seeing their profit margins decrease. So if you take this data set, which essentially says this is where consumers have decided, or the industry has decided, we're going to spend the money. And then you say, well, okay, that's maybe true or not, depending on the data set, but where do we want the money to go? And you combine that, and that is why you start to see so many stakeholders are looking at ways to drive efficiencies or more optimization within their specific part of the supply chain. So why do farmers farm? What do they get out of it? It's certainly mission-driven work, but particularly at the farm level, every single farmer I've talked to, and I'm very proud to stand up here and say as a grower, I felt this way too and still feel this way, we are all in this space because we love what we do. We love feeding the world, we love creating beautiful products for people to see. What a lot of people don't understand is in order to do that, what do we have to think about? And what are the risks associated with growing? So depending on the type of crop you grow, right, just stay with me for a second. If you're not in microgreens, let's say you have a tree crop. How often are you going to harvest your product? Or corn, how often are you going to harvest your product? Most farmers in the United States only get 40 chances in their lifetime to make a payment. 40 chances in their lifetime to make a profit. If you only have one time to grow, that's one time per season or one time per growth cycle. So what risks would you take as a grower if you only got 40 chances in your life to make money? And that kind of underpins a lot of the disconnect that we're seeing on this ag tech side right now. So that's why the focus, and I think that's why Lindsay and the team asked me to talk about specifically how do we create and open financial pathways for a part of the sector, the growers and farmers who lack access to capital when they have to produce the product full year round, they have to take care of all their costs year round, and maybe you're only getting paid once or twice a year. So I just want to highlight three companies I'm very proud to discuss. The first thing is blockchain payments for growers. I know there's a blockchain panel tomorrow. The second one is actually a seed company that decided in their business model to bundle ag tech as a service. And the last one is farmland investing. So Grain Chain. So you may be familiar with Grain Chain. I met Luis 2.5 years ago. And he specializes in facilitating grain payments on the blockchain, distributed ledger, smart contracts, and for most people, all I'm gonna say is it's Venmo on steroids. So in a previous panel, Telesens, they discussed grain bin management, but what happens once you find a buyer? What happens to the grower, right? So they've contracted to send the product, let's say to Smithfield, who we heard from earlier today, to send it from the Midwest to North Carolina, or you've contracted with a buyer in the US who's going to distribute it to China. When does the farmer get paid? It depends on how many times that product is moved. So especially for all of the growers who export their crops, they don't get paid when the other people get paid. It has to flow all the way back to them, and everybody takes their cut out, right? Everybody takes their transaction costs. There's currency trade exchanges, fees. And so Grain Chain, Luis, this is what they really tried to combat, is instead of growers being paid net 90, net 120, they wanted to do it not instantaneously, but in a more real-time method. So to date, as of this week, they have processed over 5 billion pounds of commodities, and they have completed transactions over 84,000 on the blockchain, which is phenomenal. The next one I want to talk about is Sistena. So I met Tyler in New York, and Tyler, they're just a hybrid fruit and vegetable seed company, and I didn't think that much of it. Their tagline is genetics plus technology, and I thought, that's really interesting. But as I started talking further with him, I discovered that what he's decided to do for his business. So let me back up. So all seed providers, all input providers, right, we have a vested interest in making sure the product not only is grown, but then it is sold. Because who wants to buy from an input provider or seed company? Who will buy from you again if you have bad product? So input providers certainly take helping their grower as a number one priority, even after selling them the product. So Sistena decided similarly to which I didn't realize Smithfield had done, is they're offering agronomic services for free or as part of their service. And I think this is interesting. So they have a sensor, it's cellular connected, and it monitors real-time stress on the product, which is really important for produce. You can't have a product that's too ripe or not ripe enough when it goes out for distribution. But what I thought was really interesting about his business model in terms of the finance side is you have startups, some of them here today, who lack access to the customer. It's a huge problem right now is figuring out how to drive adoption of technology. And now on top of that, you have key or traditional players deciding who have existing paying relationships with those customers who are now going to offer very competitive and very similar products. So I'm a big believer in competition, and I'm just excited to see hopefully what happens is this driving down the cost for the grower, who again probably won't get paid or may only get paid 4 times a year, if that. So a lot of the startups who come to me with subscription-based and they say, oh, it's only $10 a month, I know that they probably haven't talked to a grower who don't understand that they don't transact on even monthly, sometimes a monthly basis. So the last company I want to talk about is Farm Together. Farm Together, you may have heard, so it's an online platform. Artem, the CEO, created this online platform for investing in farmland, and it's institutional farmland at your fingertips. And I think what's really excites me about this is I get a lot of, I'll say, less sophisticated investors who certainly come to me and say, Erica, I would love to invest. How can I get into ag? And I would love to tell them, you should invest in farmland. You really should invest in farmland. And unfortunately, the only way to do that right now is through institutional funds. And in order to commit money in an institutional fund, it's a large amount of capital, usually a lot more than what these potential investors would like to invest. So what Artem does is they source the farmland themselves, and then they partner with a pretty well-regarded farm operator manager to manage the farm, and then the investors are actually buying on the platform units of that farmland, as opposed to maybe the fund, right, managing it, making distributions in several years. I'm really excited about this product because it's, as everybody has talked about, just getting more money into this space is huge, and there are tons of acres, thousands of acres that are harvested and prepped, that are planned, that are on the planting schedules, and especially where I'm based in California, unfortunately, due to labor and other costs, are just wasted. They're totally left in the fields. They've gone through maturity, and now there's nowhere to even harvest them. So if you take all of that, if you consider all of that waste in the fields, well, if maybe there had been enough capital to support those farm initiatives, then maybe it would be able to decrease, or at least have a better impact on reducing some of that waste. So I'm really excited about Artem's product as well. So in 15 minutes, we looked a little bit at 3 different companies trying to create financial pathways in agriculture, and from three different, very different business models. Grain Chain, a startup focusing on payment, right, direct to the vendor. Then we talked about Sustena, traditionally a seed company who is looking at bundling ag tech service as a secondary service for their financial model. And then we looked at Artem and Farm Together, who is working on how to invest in farmland. I love this space. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about the fact that, somebody asked me earlier today, do you miss being in the fields? And I certainly miss it. I still in my dreams. When I was farming not that long ago, the innovative practice was drip irrigation. And was saying with somebody, it still is. Drip irrigation is still very innovative. So please, I encourage you to connect with me, and I look forward to what we can do as an industry and what we're capable of. Thank you.
All right, Erica, thank you.